Hey folks, it's Frank Gallagher. I'm with the Department of Landscape Architecture with Rutgers University. I was a founding member and past president of the Alliance for New Jersey Environmental Education. I've worked with the folks at the School of Conservation for a long time, since the early 80s when I was a naturalist at High Point State Park. It truly is a special place, a place where people and landscape come together in a unique way. That special connection that John, Jerry, Randy, and Regina had with the landscape was not the first. Indeed, the land bore the indelible footprint of many peoples over thousands of years. For thousands of years, Native Americans used fire as a tool to manage wildlife and for farming. The decrease in the concentration of carbon dioxide, the red line seen in this ice core data, correlates well with the spread of smallpox through the Native American population, which probably eliminated 90% of the 60 million people. As the fires decreased, the forest grew back, sequestering much of the carbon. The next major change in the landscape came 100 years later when Sussex County became the center of the colonial mining industry. The associated furnaces in Long Pond Iron Works, in Ringwood, and in Andover would burn constantly for months at a time, using approximately 3 acres of woodland to fire the furnaces every day. The next major change to the landscapes of northern New Jersey would come as a result of national efforts from the two different Roosevelts. Teddy Roosevelt would start to protect lands at the national level, and Governor Stokes donated the first 500 acres of land that would become Stokes State Forest here in New Jersey. And then Franklin Roosevelt, as part of his New Deal, would form the Civilian Conservation Corps. During the 9 years that the CCC existed, they would build pavilions, lakes, roads, but most importantly, they planted over 3.5 billion trees. My interest in forest legacy actually began at Liberty State Park in Jersey City, where the Central Railroad of New Jersey's rail yard had naturally morphed into an urban forest. Using the many aerial photographs available, we could map the succession of the vegetative assemblages over time. Looking deeper into the data, we found that change did not occur gradually over time, but rather was punctuated at some threshold. The break in the data on the bottom graph shows where the canopy cover was impacted by Superstorm Sandy. While we know the physical damage was acute and many trees were uprooted and branches were broken, we were more interested in the long-term effects of the storm. Tree core data taken from several sites within the park demonstrate that growth rates have not recovered post-Sandy, and in fact remain quite below what was considered normal before the storm. Recently I've been thinking that many vegetative systems may be exhibiting similar nonlinear changes, and the first one that came to my mind was the red pine that were planted by the CCCs at Stokes State Forest. While most of these stands were planted in the 30s, Piney Point being a little bit later, planted in the 50s, they give us almost 100 years of continuous record. In addition, red pine is at the southern edge of its natural range, and therefore more susceptible to the impacts of climate change. In fact, our early data seems to indicate there is some type of change around the year 2000 in the growth of the red pine. Comparing these data to data sets from the central part of its range in Ontario, we get a much clearer understanding of how climate change is impacting the red pine. The final step is to compare the differences you see in the growth rates of the tree rings to the climate patterns over time. And fortunately, Dave Robinson, the state climatologist, is up next. And the best part is that there are a bunch of supplemental educational materials at almost any grade level. providing us with an opportunity to make the big picture of climate change a little bit more concrete.